Hey, hello. Hi, guys. Hi. Hello. Look at us. You got parking. You found a basically unmarked building. And if you're online, you figured out where that email was, and you got that link, and you mastered technology, and here we are. And I am so grateful we could do this together. If you are here for pastor school, will you just humor me and put your hand up, my little sweethearts? There you are. Thank you. We are so glad you're joining us. I know it has been a rough ministry few years. There has been all kinds of opportunity for love and service and people who need you. So we are very, very grateful that you're here with us tonight. Yes, pastors. This is the Everything Happens community. This is where we come because everything happens for a reason that we have not yet been made aware of, and which is why we are here tonight. My name is Kate Bowler, and I'm an author, and I'm a historian here at Duke University, so this is my home, and I'm grateful that you are with me in it. Welcome to this pit of sorrow. I thought this would be a nice time for us to have a little conversation about what the last few years have felt like in terms of our lessening, that feeling of diminishment we get sometimes where there was just less time, less opportunities for joy, a little less bounce. And so I brought someone here tonight who is a fantastic Tigger. She is an expert in joy and beauty. And so before I introduce her, I just wanted you to know that she already knows what we need, which is the feeling of more. She is the author, of course, of Eat, Pray, Love, which sold like 13 million copies, and there's a movie starring Julia Roberts, and she is successfully referenced in 100% of the television shows I watch. So she has written gorgeous books, wonderful works of nonfiction like Committed, and incredible novels like City of Girls and The Signature of All Things. But she is also the author of my very, very favorite book on creativity. So tonight, I hope you will embrace my deep and abiding love of shouting on university campuses and give her a warm and undignified welcome, Liz Gilbert. Hello, love you.
I thought I'd start the indignity right away.
That's right. A
little skipping thing.
A triple somersault. I didn't know if that was possible. We may all be having that strange zigzaggy feeling our lives get where we thought they would take a straight line and then they kind of fell off a cliff, and then we look at ourselves in the mirror and we're like, oh, how'd that happen? And I guess one of the things that worries me right now is that one of the things that we can have as adults is that feeling of joy and beauty that is still possible, but that gets like crushed out of us as adults. So I thought maybe we could start there. Why perhaps our job titles are like a terrible description of what we're capable of. I'm just going to trail off now.
Ellipsis.
And why are we this way?
Let's go. It's a good. Thank you for your question.
Am I dead inside? Is it just
about joy being crushed out of our souls and spirit until we're flattened with despair?
Yes.
Let's just start with
That's exactly
that.
where I'm starting.
Great to meet you, Kate. It's just your work It's so uplifting and
Welcome.
First of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you all for coming. I really, really, really appreciate you being here. And I want to quickly tell you that my neighbor's 16-year-old came to my house the other day, in the spring actually, to borrow some clothes for prom. And she was putting on a fancy dress that I had, and she asked me why I had it. And I said, well, I wore that dress to the London premiere of Eat, Pray, Love. And she said, oh, that's right. I always forget you used to be famous. So when I heard there were so many people coming, I was like, take that, Callie. I'm still famous in Raleigh, Durham. Anyway, so thank you. It means a lot to me that you're here. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. But back to the crushed spirits.
Back to the despair.
Well, I feel like I don't know anybody who, after the age of like 35 at the most, maybe 40, could not write a memoir with the same title, and that title would be Not Exactly What I Had Planned, right? Yeah. Like, I feel like that's literally the description of everybody's life. Yeah. And I don't know why we were kept in the dark about that. Because maybe it's this culture that just continues to believe that you can create a purpose-driven life, and that you can chart and curate your life, and it can go exactly the way that you want it to. But why does anybody believe that? Because their lives aren't like that either. The people who wrote those books have terrible losses and divorces and crushing illnesses and deaths in the family and impossible things. So I guess the first thing is to normalize there is no solid ground under our feet. And the futility of making long-term plans with anything but the lightest touch, like maybe I'll stay with this person forever. Maybe they'll leave me for my best friend. Maybe I'll have children. Maybe I won't be. Like, we don't know what, like, there's so much uncertainty. And so start there. Like, instead of starting with trying to, especially now, instead of starting with trying to wrench control out of chaos, which I feel like is the soul-crushing thing. I feel like that is where the spirit gets pancaked, is when you're like, Byron Katie always says, whenever I argue against reality, I lose. One of the things you lose is joy, right? Because you're just in such a ferocious argument against life on life's terms, or as non-addicts apparently call it, life. Like, you're in such a ferocious argument against it that's all you're doing, is like wrestling against it. And then how can you possibly find joy in that? So I think the acceptance of the chaos and the groundlessness is the beginning of the possibility of joy.
It's such an anti-American thing that you just said, though, because self-help is they invented, the poor New York Times in 1984 was like, screw it, we're just going to have to make a category for this genre because it's all of the books that anyone reads. It's the formulas, it's the checklists, it's the mastery, certainty feeling that we get hooked on. And then I imagine when it becomes sand, we feel purposeless and, just like a failure.
And maybe, well, here's the other thing I have a problem with, that it makes me very anti-American. This is my if you think I was anti-American, it's, there is a pathological obsession, and I don't use the word pathology lightly here, in this country, with making sure that your life has a higher purpose than just having a life, which is already pretty incredible. Like, just having a life is already pretty amazing, but that's not good enough. It has to be a purposeful life. So this is the formula that we've all been fed, and we've been fed it our entire lives. You've heard it in every commencement speech. You've heard it in every inspirational speech. And it's, each of you is born with a special gift. Each of you has one unique offering. That's why you were sent here, to find what that is. The one thing that you can do that literally nobody else can do. It's your job in life, your purpose, to uncover what that thing is. And then once you find it, you must foster it and master it and curate it until you are at the top of that thing that only you can do. And then you must monetize it. Because if you don't monetize it, you're not really successful at it. It's just a hobby. So you must monetize it. But it's not enough to monetize it and be very successful at it. You must be an opportunity creator for other people within this purpose that you created, so that you bring other people, you uplift other people with your purpose. And it's not enough that you uplift other people with your purpose and you monetize it. You must leave a legacy. You must leave a legacy so that when you are gone, generations after you're gone, the world is a changed place because you were here. No pressure. But that is literally what you have been taught. Am I wrong? Is that not literally what you have been taught? So everybody that I know is struggling from so much purpose anxiety that they can't live. And what if that's totally wrong? No one ever questions it, but what if that's totally wrong? What if I have literally no idea what my purpose is? I don't know. I can take some guesses at it, but like, I remember walking down the street one time in Los Angeles before an event, and I had an hour to kill, and I was just noodling about. And there was a guy, and he had a ladder, and he was standing at the top of the ladder painting a sign on his awning. And the ladder was unstable, I could clearly see. And I grew up with a jackass father who was always at the top of a dumb ladder doing ridiculous things. So I'm programmed to like hold the ladder. So I ran across 4 lanes of traffic in LA, and I held the ladder for 45 minutes for this guy. He didn't even know I was there. I had nothing else to do. I just, and I was like, this is such a really great way for me, because I don't have to worry about him, So I held the ladder, and it was a nice day, and it was fine. And as he came down, when he reached a period of safety, I peeled off and I walked away, and he never knew I was there. We never had any interaction. And as I walked away, I thought, this is when I gave up purpose anxiety. I was like, what if that was literally the purpose of my life? What if, not that kind of thing, but literally that? What if, they put me here because, they needed somebody in Sector 8, Neighborhood 11 at 0900 hours in order to make sure that that guy didn't fall off his ladder because he's really needed for some little piece of the cosmic puzzle. And what if my purpose has been served and now I can just hang out, and what if all this other stuff I've done was just me killing time before they needed me at the ladder station that moment, what if you lived that way? Truly, what if you lived that way instead of the other way that I just laid out that makes me break out in hives? Yeah. And you just looked for the next right thing to do, and while you were waiting to be notified of a ladder to hold, you could just do some paint by numbers and garden and hang out with people that you like. Martha Beck says the only purpose of life is to be with people you like, doing things you like. What if that's it?
It reminds me of the moment in Bill Murray's character for Groundhog's Day, where every day at a certain time he catches someone that falls down from a tree. And I imagine the rest of his day he was like, well, just gotta
and
be back
I've got my appointment to catch them.
I did actually find I thought I was going to find my single purpose that no one else had done, which is that I would not just be a pretty good cellist, but I'd be the first singing cellist. And I'd just be like, la, 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 la. Turns out it was not a genre. And I was not a breakthrough artist in that genre. On the over-purposing.
You can't just walk away from that and
you like how I just sashayed out the side?
I'm going to need the singing cello performance. Okay, go ahead.
I do worry so one of the things that is a pretty unifying experience for everything happens type people is that they have either gone through something really difficult, and then there's an intensity around, well, what I have left is really precious to me. And so I think a lot of a feeling of desperation to make the most of everything, which can be heavy and light depending on how it feels in the day. And then also a lot of people who are what I love describing as emotionally expensive professions. So they feel deeply called to teaching, nursing, pastoring, a lot of showing up when they don't want to. Linda needs you there on Wednesday. Linda doesn't care how you feel Wednesday morning and if you slept, And I love hearing them describe the feeling of being called from outside of themselves. And yet I do feel the weariness of then not being able to do anything for no reason. I asked my beautiful, beautiful community, yes, you are, to maybe write in some of the things that you used to do when you had free time. And there was a lot of, surprising amount of piccolo, but climbing trees, finger painting, Irish dancing, writing poetry, a lot of like just doing it but being not afraid. Embroidery, gardening. People were very committed to rollerblading in, I don't think, the 90s. It felt current when I was reading it. But just the sense of, or dumb team sports. Like maybe we're explaining pickleball right now. But the feeling of not having everything be quite so burdened, especially for people who have like a lot of obligations.
I have a friend who always says to me, Liz, she says, because that's my name. I don't know why I'm like an old-timey raconteur right now. She says to me, in my long life, I've learned, she says to me, is there anything you can't do just a little bit of? Like, is there anything, no matter how good, that you can't figure out a way to overdo? Like, is there any, like, so even the really good things that I do for my life, it's like always cranked up to 10, you know? And so if your calling is to serve, but you turn it into a grind, I'm not sure that's what the call was, right? And now, I'm not saying that that's easy. Everything in this culture is a grind, because it's a very pushy, grindy, hardcore culture, right? So it's difficult to do anything a little bit. Like, the culture doesn't want you to do anything a little bit either. So you know, when you were saying about like getting the most out of life, you know, the thought that ran through my head was like, what if you tried getting the least? Like, in it,
Liz.
I know,
you are just getting to know me, but I can ruin anything.
I think me too, you know, and I have a very strong connection with the God of my understanding, who is very affectionate and very funny, because that's the God I need. And when I'm like, am I doing enough? Like, that's a whole thing of mine, is, am I doing enough? Have I produced enough? Have I helped enough? Have I left a legacy? Have I am I serving your purpose, God? Like, are you satisfied with me, Lord? Have I taken too much and given too, like, whatever? You know, I always have this feeling of this very affectionate presence saying, when I've got something for you to do, you'll be notified. And it will be very clear. And until then, be cool for 2 minutes. Like, be cool for 2 minutes, because you can't hear me when you're grinding so hard at trying to be so good. Right? Like, you actually can't hear me calling. The call that I've brought, it's not a one and done. Like, God doesn't call me once and then set me on my path. God's like, hey, I'm going to need you to hold that ladder for 45 minutes. Like, hey, I'm going to need, you know, but I need to be available to that. And for me to be available to that, honestly, I have to say no to a lot of things, right? I have to say no to a lot of opportunities to prove what a good person I am. In order to be rested enough to be available to hear what I think of as my higher power wants me to be next, which might not necessarily be where my ego wants me to be next. Does that make sense?
How would I then experience the fatigue that lets me know what a good person I am?
There's a line in Big Magic. There was a British wit who said, you can always tell people who live for others by the exhausted expressions on the faces of the others. There's also that.
Yes. I'm helping you, damn it. Yes. I hope will be my
I am
very
being good
last
at
words.
You. I am being helpful at you.
You can pry this good out of my cold dead
We'll
hand.
never forget this thing I've done for you.
Yes, that is precisely, that will be my legacy. Yes, exactly. Yes, it'll be death by Enneagram 2. you have this beautiful line from the poet Jack Gilbert that I think about once a week, and it is, do you have the courage? Do you have the courage to bring forth this work? The treasures that are hidden inside you are hoping you will say yes. When you describe needing to say no, I just picture like putting things down in order to even notice the little glitter of something else that is beautiful, that shines, that discernment, that prudential wisdom. That sounds like it needs a certain kind of courage.
It does, and again, everyone will be against it. Like, this is the thing, like, it requires a kind of fortitude to disappoint people a lot.
Yeah.
And I did Glennon's podcast recently, and she said, we always ask our guests for like one thing that you can do to make your life better, and I was like, disappoint somebody today. Disappoint somebody today, get used to it. It's good for them. It's good for me when I get disappointed. I don't like nobody likes hearing the word no. I don't like hearing the word no. And then I have to process that, and I have to learn how to be okay with the fact that I can't have everything I want when I want it. And that's a good thing for me. So it's actually mutually beneficial to learn how to say no. And there's a line I read, I wish I could remember, it was in the New York Times, there was an article recently, and there was and she was a female artist who died recently, and she said, this is a really important thing for me as a creator. She said, my solitude has absolutely no intrinsic value to anybody but me. I am valued in my community and in my relationships by how much of myself I give to people. And nobody gets anything out of me being alone and quiet except me. And therefore, I have to be the guardian of that, because no one else is going to protect it for me, because they don't want me to be alone and quiet. They want me to be doing stuff for them. And so you have to get sort of ferocious about, I won't function correctly if I don't have this amount of time to sleep. I won't be able to write books if I don't say no to 90% of the invitations that I have. I won't be able to hear my higher power if I'm serving everybody else's needs too much. And there is a wisdom, I don't know, I've gotten better at it as I've gotten older. Going through losses has helped. When my partner Rhea was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I got really good at it, you know, because suddenly I was like, boy, are my priorities clear. Like, this person is my priority, and that's about it right now, you know? And I got really good at deleting emails without responding to them. I now do that once a week as a sort of a party. I go through my inbox and I'm like, just not even gonna respond. I'm not even gonna take my one wild and precious life to tell you why I'm not responding to your email. I'm just not going to respond to your email. Lots of people don't respond to my emails. Lots of people don't respond to my texts. It's like, normalize not responding to emails and texts. You know, like, I know it sounds brutal, but the world will eat you like moths, and you won't be available for hearing the call. You won't be available for loving the people that you truly love. You know those people, your best friends who you haven't seen in 9 months? And you live in the same town and you're like, why don't we ever see them? Why don't we ever get together? It's because of all this answering emails of people you don't care about, you know? And I think that the 3 of the strongest words that you can use to create a life where you can have the courage to bring forth the treasures that are hidden inside of you are, I don't care. I really have to decide who I don't care about and what I don't care about. Because the honest truth is there's a lot of people I don't care, like, I mean, I care about them in a general way as human beings, but their urgency is not my emergency. Their thing that they want me to be doing, that they want me to lend my name, I'm like, this isn't my mission. You know, like, I've got these people who I care about, I've got these political causes that I care about, I've got this work that I care about, and I've got to keep it small or else I'm not going to make it. And I'm going to be one of the 70 to 80% of Americans who are suffering from chronic anxiety right now. It's not working, right? Like, can we just agree that, and how slavishly Do you want to follow the mores of a culture that is literally destroying itself and the world? Like, how sincerely do you want to be obedient to what that culture teaches you about how you have to live? Look what that culture is doing to our actual planet and everybody on it. It's not working for anybody. So there has to be a certain level of rebellion. When you said courage, I feel like it's almost more like it's rebellion against that. It's a stubborn rebellion against that. Like, I'm not joining you on this death mission of like this martyred living of just, I can't do it. Be more selfish, says author Elizabeth Gilbert when she comes to speak to the Duke Divinity School.
Well,
if you want to help people, be more selfish.
I think it was pretty overwhelming to suddenly then, I mean, I'm just thinking of if someone's a pastor of a congregation, to suddenly then be a televangelist and the tech person and try desperately to mic themselves during the worship portion. And I mean, it's been very difficult to have these, who are our people, where are they, how do I know if my efforts are being poured into the right places, and how do I allow people to then pour into mine? It's so hard when we've got such endlessly instrumentalized language for everything. I remember the first time I thought I would try to write creatively instead of write history books, which are difficult. But it was just like, it felt like a shirt being turned inside out all of a sudden, and it felt very strange. But then when I was done, the comments were, well, wasn't that very therapeutic? Or didn't you just write that so you could help people? And the truth was, I was only just trying to learn to be alive when my world felt so small and impossible. And I was desperate to have a witness to whatever this is that we get. And writing can just slow it down and make it suddenly shimmery again. And it feels lovely to have anything to discover right now instead of just keep pace all the time.
That's so beautiful. And I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to when I say it sounds as though you wrote that because you couldn't help it, right? Like, you couldn't help it.
Yeah.
Like, you needed to, wanted to, and longed to be in the sweetness, that strange pulling sweetness of like, gosh, there's something I'm trying to say about something that can't be spoken.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can do it, you know?
And it was usually terrible. Like, I think the worst thing I ever wrote, which is a sentence I don't know why I'm finishing right now, but people, I think because the promise of heaven is great and beautiful, and but I knew that leaving a kid behind would be impossible. So I wrote, the promise of heaven to me is this: one day I will grow a new set of lungs and I will swim away, but first I will drown. And like, sometimes we just gotta dig out life for whatever it is. So the noticing, you're a very good noticer. It has a very sparkly, it's the digging I want everyone to still have in our culture that just likes it when we're moving.
You can't do it if you're thinking, am I having an impact? Well, also, you can't know. You can't know. I mean, I think the most humble way to move through the world is, I can't know.
Yeah.
I can't know. I can't know why I'm here. Like, that's what's so arrogant about the purpose-driven life. There's such cultural arrogance in it to assume that you can know why you were born. like, you can take some guesses, but we don't even know what consciousness is. We literally have no idea what's going on here. You know, so do you see the arrogance in saying, like, I'm going to have a legacy? You don't even know if reality is real. I don't know if you're all a construct of my virtual reality imagination. Some physicists are saying very much that's all it is. It's just a screen of, like, so you're walking around like, I'm going to leave an impact, you know, like, we don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. We don't know what's going on. Nobody sees. It's very Jobian in terms of, like, have you measured the breadth of heaven? Were you there when light was invented? Like, do you have any idea? Do you feed the wild raven? No, I do not. You know, I can barely fucking feed myself. You know, like, so I just think, like, I feel the angst. I see this in so many people. I see, and it makes me want to cry. They won't make a thing because they are convinced that it won't make an impact. Mm-hmm. And so they stop before they begin because they're like, well, this already exists. Somebody already did this. Yeah. Nobody wants this. My voice isn't needed. I don't have to, you know, and it's like, who gives a shit? Like, who literally, I'm sorry, I'm going to get all cursy here in front of your pastors, but, like, who literally cares what the impact is? I said it a million times to people. I'm like, you will be a different person at the end of this creative experience than you were at the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. Why is that not enough? Mm-hmm. Why does it then have to, like, land on everybody? Like, we would, like, you guys, I was a journalist who only wrote about men. I wrote for GQ magazine, I wrote for Spin magazine, I wrote for Esquire magazine. My first 3 books, 2 of them had the word men in the title. I was a woman who wrote about men. That was my thing. It was my niche. And I had a good job at GQ, and I made good money, and I wrote profiles of men. I, like, sat in rooms, and men talked about themselves, and I wrote it down, and I put it into books. I wrote a book called The Last American Man about a guy who talked about himself for 2 years to me, and I wrote it down, and they gave me the National Book Award nomination for writing this great book about this guy talking about himself. And this is what I did as a literal career. And then I had a nervous breakdown, and my marriage fell apart, and I lost all my certainties, and the whole world crumbled, and I was like, I need to go eat in Italy, and I need to go pray in India, and I need to go to Bali because I met this medicine man who told me I was destined to go there. I'm going to quit the best job currently available in journalism and do this thing because I can't help it. And it was such a bad idea, career-wise. Like, it was such a bad idea. And right before I went on that trip, I got a letter from David freaking Remnick at the New Yorker saying, we would like you to come and write at the New Yorker. And I said, thank you, David Remnick. I'm going to go eat a lot of pizza in Italy and sell my house. I'm going to sell my house and try to cure my vast depression and despair by going on a journey that I don't even understand. Thank you for the job offer of the best job in the world. I'm going to go do this dumb thing. And I'm going to write about a woman who no one cares about. Like, no one cares about me except for as a vehicle to write these stories about these big, important men. But I'm going to go write this book. And when I was done with it, I said to the book, I remember putting my hands on it and saying, thank you for this experience. Mm-hmm. If nothing else ever comes of you, you and I have had this experience. Mm-hmm. And now I'll go back to writing the kinds of books that people probably want me to be writing. Mm-hmm. And that was Eat, Pray, Love, right? So and I'm not saying that like to say, do the thing you want to do and you'll have success. Like, I've done that the whole time. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff I've made people like, and some of it they don't, but it doesn't matter. Do the thing you can't help doing. That's it. That's what God wants you to be doing, because the thing you can't help doing is actually God's voice saying, come and do this thing with me. Mm-hmm. Like, and don't worry about why. Mm-hmm. We can't know why anything. Mm-hmm. We can't know why anything.
You say this horrible thing. You say, your book on creativity is full of horrible things. And one of my favorites
That's my favorite blurb. This book is full of horrible things. Kate Bowler.
I'll submit my own photo.
Put that right on the cover.
You say, argue for your limitations, and you get to keep them. That's a wonderful thing to say, because there's maybe 1,000 of us here, and so that's roughly, just quick math, 1 million reasons why we shouldn't do anything that people aren't telling us or paying us to do.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't ever try because no one cares about gardening. You could just buy it at the store. Embroidery, there's machines that do that. This is mechanized at this point. I mean, anything that brings us joy could be done faster and cheaper by someone we pay. Frankly, how's that for an argument against creativity?
Yeah.
But we do
That's what TV is.
Yes, exactly.
It's like watching people do things that you pay for.
I don't need a story. You tell me
You
the
tell
story.
me a story.
What am I living?
Yeah.
It is a strange act of God's bizarre love that we feel stirred to make things that don't always have a why anywhere near them. I watch my kid make up things that are just useless all day.
And they're great.
They are, yes, absolutely.
They're great and useless is the title of my next book about creativity.
For no good reason.
I mean, that is actually what I think creativity is. And I think it's, the evidence that when I hear people say, I don't have a creative bone in my body, first of all, I say, you've just taken a stand on that. Like, you just took a stand on that when you said that. Like, sometimes it's like, think of the things you're saying that you're taking a stand on.
Yeah.
I'm standing on this ground. I don't have a creative...
You can't prove to me
You
I
can't.
have
Okay,
creativity.
listen, I'm not gonna, I don't want to get in a fight with you about it, but I will because you're wrong. And because the evidence, we are the creative ape. It's literally what we do. Every single inch of this planet has been altered by human creativity. We make things, we change things, we alter things. Every single one of your ancestors was creative. Every single one of them. Every single one of, your children show up and you put like colors in front of them and they're like, I know how to do this. Like, they know how to do, they know how to do it instinctively. They want to do it. They want to play with form. They want to play with shape. They want to play with stories. They want to play with songs. They want to play with imagining that there's something else. Like, it's what we literally do. Yeah. And one of the great tragedies is that this culture has professionalized it. And the term, like, there's a term I hate so much, a creative. I'm a creative. It makes me flinch because it's like, first of all, who isn't? Secondly, like, that's a class now. Like, we've put it into a class, and if you're not in that class, then you don't get to be in that class, and that's just really wrong. And I think about my grandparents. My grandparents were Depression-era farmers in northern Minnesota during the Depression, Lutherans, Scandinavians. These are the least happy people who have ever lived. Like, these are the least free, let me put it this way, these are the least free people who have ever lived. Like, these people are strict.
Pizza.
Never
eat pizza.
No, you don't have, like, salt is something you use sparingly and pepper you hide from the children, right? Like, these are not risk-taking people. These are very, these were not people who would call themselves artists or bohemians based on, like, there's none of that spirit. But they made things that were so achingly beautiful. And they were far more beautiful than they needed to be.
Yes.
These are the most pragmatic people who have ever lived. My grandmother and my great-grandmother's quilts are so beautiful that their descendants put them in frames and hang them on walls. They didn't have to be that beautiful.
Yes, that's right.
They had to make quilts because their kids were cold and they couldn't afford to buy new fabric, and it was a good use of scraps. But it didn't have to look like that.
Yeah.
Right? What is that? Like that, these people had no free time. My grandmother was pregnant 9 times, lost multiple children. They were always on the brink of losing the farm. Their life was nothing but strain. Why did she take time she didn't have to make something more beautiful than it needed to be,
Yeah.
because she couldn't help it.
Yeah, that's right.
The same reason that you
Yeah.
wrote your book, you couldn't help it. The same reason I went traveling for Eat, Pray, Love. We can't help it.
Yeah.
Beauty is part of our inheritance.
That's lovely.
And it's, you get to do it.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, I don't mean this threateningly, but if you like put it aside because you're like, nobody wants this, no, I can't monetize this, I can't leave a legacy with this, it's already out there in the world.
Yeah.
There's a part of you, this journey through this very difficult experience in human form is even harder.
Yes.
If you don't allow yourself to give in to making something that you can't help making because it's so beautiful.
That's so
It's
good.
even harder.
That's so good. That's so good. Because I love it when you call it like creative as like amplified living. That's
Yeah.
all the, every time I look at you, I want to do shimmery. I'm trying to do shimmery hands because it feels.
Is this shimmery?
This is the like, and it just
Carbonation.
It reminds me of every time I had the grouchiest grandfather in all of the whole of the world, but he kept a rock polishing machine, which is enormous and very loud, around just because when I would pick one up and then he would put it in the machine, then after we could just stare at the way that the facets are something lovelier than they were before. And then we noticed every dumb, beautiful rock. And when you describe creativity, I think, yes, I would like to notice more dumb, beautiful rocks.
Yeah. And make nothing out of it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I own all these rocks
well,
now.
there you go. But like,
So,
that's what you and your grandfather did was literally the whole thing. It was like, I found a rock. Let's polish it. Now we're going to look at it, and that's it.
yeah, I did try a rock. He lived in a trailer park right near the border, and I tried to sell
Try
them
to
for
sell
a
them,
bit,
yeah,
but
you see.
people were like, rocks are already available.
Please read Kate's new memoir, Selling Rocks on the Border. Coming out this time next year. Dumb, Beautiful Rocks, another great title for a memoir. Yeah, like, why does there have to be a reason?
Yeah. Last week, I just met Thomas Lynch, that incredible poet and funeral director. Amazing, amazing combination of words together in a sentence, and I'm obsessed with him. It's one of those conversations where like, you don't already know this, but I've quoted you my whole life. But we were talking about why build beautiful coffins, and this feels like a good, because half of his book, he's like, the dead don't care, they don't need that. But then why, because Mennonites have this lovely way of like building the coffin, and the women will cook and the men will build, and because it is, so I said, why do we do that? Like, if they don't care, then why do we do that? And he said, well, if we do good and beautiful things, then it gets the dead to where they need to go and the living to where they need to be.
Oh,
Isn't that
Kate.
the argument about what happens when we polish all our dumb rocks, you know?
Wow. I think also that we have to remember that, so agriculture is only 10,000 years old. Art is 100,000 years old. And that's the art that remains. That's the art we can prove, right? We can prove, we've got like, archaeology has proven they've found art that's like stuff that's clearly not got a practical purpose. It's not a hammer, you know, it's a drawing. It's a piece of jewelry. It's something that's more beautiful than it needs to be, right? Which is a pretty good definition of art. But we don't know that people weren't singing and dancing before then, or making art that didn't last, or telling stories. They had 100 years ago, people had the same brains we have. All of this creativity, all of this energy, all of this emotion. What did they do with their time prior to the advent of agriculture? Which, you know, what we know of hunter-gatherer societies is they have a lot more time. You know, they work like 10-hour weeks.
What?
You know? Yeah,
really?
For real. For real. Agriculture, it turns out, was maybe a really bad deal for people. Like, it brought war. It brought like, all of a sudden you're hoarding. It brought like, there's whole books about this. But anyway, for those 90,000 years before we were hoarding, what were we doing? Before we were hoarding and protecting our hoard and building what we called civilization, what were these people with all this time on their hands and these great, amazing imaginations doing? I think they were mostly hanging out with people they liked, doing what they liked, and making stuff because they liked it. I think that's pretty much what was going on.
I like that as a historian. I should probably just like wrap it up.
I feel like that pretty much wraps it up.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing none of us do anymore, pretty much. That is like the last thing we do because we've crammed our lives with so much productivity, and we've even made kindness into production, into careers, into like my friend said, is there anything, Liz, you can't do just a little bit of, going back to that. But what if that's it? Like, what if it's just that? What if it's just being near people who make you feel warm and making things that make you feel good and looking at them like the way you and your grandfather looked at rocks?
Yeah.
Couldn't that suffice?
The anti-perfectionism you're asking for, Liz, is difficult for me to process through my nervous system. I've noticed it. I've always wanted like a cure for perfectionism because when I see it in people, the lightness of it, even when they are doing things, and it's almost like they just look at it. Like my friend Will, who I suspect, Will, every talk I'm going to talk about you. I'm so sorry. But this is the friendship for 1,000 years. And my friend Will writes a new book every year, and he doesn't seem to be bothered by how no one else knows how that's possible. And but he does stuff like this, where he's like, I made you this wooden snake. And I was like, no one asked for a wooden snake. But there's great pride. He's doing a lot of like dangerous woodworking, a lot of just light amputation in like a mountain home, which feels further from medical care. But I think the secret of Will Willimon, is the like, and he just like does something else. Like he went through a very long stick phase where like everything was made out of sticks, and like a strong watercolor several years, and like a mermaid made of shells. And you're like, why? But he knows why. And
does he even know why?
Yeah.
Because I don't even know why I make the things I make.
When I look, there has got to be some people who have figured out how to turn down the volume of perfectionism, and then regardless of whether they make, unnecessary, I guess all beauty is wonderful.
Do you ever tell your friend, Will, I could go to the store and buy my own wooden snake, and you could have more time to be productive in other ways?
But it says on the back, and he wrote it in marker, Kate's snake. And then put it up.
See, I want to live in that world.
Me too.
It's such a better world, and we have access to that.
I want that energy too.
I think.
Yeah.
So I think, about perfectionism, I think it helps to call it by its real name, which is terror. And it comes out of a place of tremendous lack and tremendous fear that you're not enough, that you don't have enough, that you'll never be enough, that you're supposed to be more, that your life has to be constantly proven and earned.
Yeah.
And
proven and earned.
Proven
Liz, those are
and
horrible
earned,
words,
aren't they?
Yeah.
And you have to prove it and earn it through all these torturous tests that never really succeed. And the freaky thing about perfectionism, and it makes sense, but this culture really honors it.
Yeah.
And it's often considered to be a good trait when you're at a job interview. I care too much, if anything.
I'll
people,
never let this go.
I won't let the job go till it's done right. But it's so fear-based. It's so lack-based.
Yeah.
It's so it's a real joy killer. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about fear because it feels like it's the byproduct of the really good things and the really terrible things. I've been really struggling to I always try to imagine right-sizing it to the room I'm in, but that takes so much work because if something terrible happens, diagnosis, just even scan intervals, then everything is terrifying, not enough time. Or friends who get, relationships end or friendships atrophy and oh, I guess I'm never gonna love again. So all the terrible things constrict us, but then the good things can have the same effect too. I did something lovely. That's a one and done, one hit wonder. That's never gonna happen again.
I've peaked. How many times do you hear people say that?
Totally.
Yikes.
Yes, that's
peaked
right.
On what scale? Who's measuring?
It's just an avalanche downward
Yeah.
now. It does, how do we stay in that kind of softer, gentler, more open place when fear feels like the most natural byproduct of all things bad and good?
So I've got a friend who's working on a book about this right now. My friend Martha Beck. Do you know Martha Beck's work? Anyway, she's great. If those of you who might know her, she was the first life coach. She's I launched that horrible word, and she still is that. But anyway, she's great and brilliant and has 3 Harvard degrees like we do too. And but she's working on a book about this because she's why has fear taken over so ferociously?
Yeah.
Where anxiety really is the true pandemic, and it's spreading so much, and it's so, why are we so incredibly terrified? And anyway, what she's been sharing with me, I'm always tell me more, because I'm a very fearful, anxious person. But my saving grace is that I have this much more curiosity than I have fear, and I have a lot of fear, but I have a lot of curiosity too. But just tips the scale. All you have to have is 1% more curiosity. And I wrote that in Big Magic because that's just been my own lived experience. But Martha called me the other day to say, it turns out you're right. It turns out that the mirror opposite, so fear lives on the left side of the brain, and it's down here, and it's oh my God, we're all gonna die, everything is terrifying. It's lack. It's there's a clock ticking. Everything's going to be taken away. Even if it's good, it's worse because then you'll lose the good thing. Don't it's be careful. You're all going to die. Just horrible. And then wrapped around that center of the brain, there's another part of the brain that sees that fear and is I will fix this by controlling everything. Right? And that's where the perfectionism comes in, where it's all the perfectionism is trying to do is to control the fear. Right? So it's I will learn everything about this subject so that we don't have to be afraid of it. It turns out that there are very few things you can do that are worse for anxiety than learning about things. Learning about things is apparently very bad for your mental health. And we've now created a culture where we have the internet, so you can just go on these dives to them, learning. Apparently it doesn't take fear away. You think, it seems like it would.
You pre-worked.
You're if I could master this, then I wouldn't have to be afraid of it anymore, right? And so that's the Google deep dive at 4 a.m. when you're trying to get all the information about something so that you won't fear it anymore, but you wake up and you've never been more afraid, right? So these two things just get in this feedback loop where it's fear, control, panic, learn more, panic, learn more. The learning just fed the panic, and now there's more things to be worried about. But the right side of the brain...
I want this side now.
Yeah. The right side of the brain is pretty. Soft. What's this?
Fluffy.
Does it smell like something? What happens if you put these this and you go I might take that. What if I make what happens if I mix it? It's this whole, and where the left side of the brain's don't do anything. Shut it down. The right side of the brain's what happens if I poke that? What happens if I smell that? What happens if I eat that? What happens if I kiss that person? What happens if I go to this country? What happens if and all it wants to do is play. All it wants to do is what we would maybe call play. And right side of the brain activities include cooking and going for walks outside, and drawing and actually reading is a right side of the brain activity, as long as it's not learning. Learn it, like don't learn, just read. You know,
that's a right side of university. I love it.
No more learning. You've done enough. You're hurting yourselves. Stop. And weirdly, even though it's very language based, writing is a right side of the brain activity. And it's weird because it puts you, when you're in the zone, you go into this state of wordless oneness, even though you're creating words. Like, so creativity is the right side of the brain. Touching things, tactile, you know, like, honestly, like, you can do a lot to make your life better by going outside and poking things and smelling them, you know, asking questions of people, just being interested in being like, so going back to what I started with all of us could write a memoir called Not Exactly What I Had Planned. The ellipsis after that could be, but this is interesting, you know, like, wow, that's interesting. Didn't see this coming, but like, what could this unfold, you know? And so if you can stay interested, apparently you can stay out of panic attacks. Even watching, like, and I'm super oversensitive, very emotional, weepy, cryy, fearful, anxious person. But when I fall apart, and I had one last night, like I was in the hotel room and I was like, oh, it's happening. I'm sobbing. Like,
oh, lovey.
I know, because I just saw Suleika, our beloved friend who's very ill, and I was like, oh dear, my friend is very sick. Oh my God, this is terrifying. I don't want to, like, what do we do? I'm powerless, you know, and I'm like melting down, and I'm like, I don't want to melt down, I won't sleep well, and my eyes will be puffy tomorrow, and I have to perform, and like, I'm trying to, it's the control, right? But now I'm like, well, what if we just let that happen? And see if, like, we just let's just let all those emotions out. So I'm like at my hotel room here in Raleigh-Durham, hugging a pillow and weeping. But there's another part of me that's watching me do that. Every single part of your life, there has been something watching you do it, right? Like, even if you think about your very worst, you wouldn't have been able to write your memoir if you hadn't been a witness also to the thing that was happening. And so I'm watching myself sobbing. It's not making me not sob, but I'm interested in it. I'm like, oh, I'm almost like an anthropologist. I'm like, the female is upset. The female is experiencing separation pain because one of her tribe members has been harmed, and she's expressing pain. And I'm watching and I'm like, I wonder how long this crying jag will last. I got curious about it. I wonder if I'll cry all night. I wonder how long it'll go. And then, you guys, I woke up this morning. I don't remember stopping crying. I remember that I was crying. I remember that I was holding a pillow. And then I woke up and it was 6 o'clock. Because the thing watching me, something's holding all of this, right? And when I watch myself, I feel like I'm watching myself from the collective consciousness that's holding this whole story together that's playing out. And I'm curious because it's a very interesting story. You know, it's so interesting to be here. It's so interesting to lose people and to be like when Rhea got diagnosed, I was like, well, this is interesting. I'm sobbing. I still sob about Rhea 5 years after her death, but I'm also like, well, this is really interesting because this was literally the one person I said I couldn't live without. Now that's interesting. That's so interesting. I lost the one person in the entire history of my life who I said, this is the one you can't take, God. And God's like, that's the one I'm taking now. And I was like, well, that's interesting because I literally don't know how to live without that person. So how am I going to do this? This is interesting. And horrible, but interesting. It's so interesting.
It's like it pulls a little thread, and then it kind of pulls you into the bigger experience of, because then you're back in the love, and then the desire to be known again, and then all the things that kind of pull you back into that horrible interdependence that makes our lives.
Horrible interdependence. You have the best book titles. That's also a great book title.
It's a terrible world, and I love it. But that curiosity you're describing, where reminds me of Lanicia Rouse Tinsley is this lovely abstract artist and also a Duke Divinity School person, and she had been commissioned. I always touch all the things.
The corsage.
Exactly. She just lost her baby, and she had been commissioned to make all these really enormous abstract pieces. And so she bought these just redonkulously big canvases, and they just sort of sat around accusing her of not being productive. And she would walk by them, but she felt so in that terrible place where she was in a world surrounded by loves she can't live without. And but she felt the nagging feeling of that big story, and she said something to herself that that's always stuck with me. She said, I look at them and then I am reminded that these blank canvases will not remain blank forever. And that then our creativity pulls us into curiosity and into hope, and then back around through all the work of beauty and despair. And Liz, you insist that we pay attention to the absurdity, the pain, and the glory of our lives. And for that, I am so grateful that you've been with us tonight. Can we give our lovely guest a round of applause?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Kate Ballard, ladies and
This is
gentlemen.
our very
the
first
only.
event, and I cannot believe we
Her
have
very
Liz Gilbert.
first event.
So it's so ridiculous. It makes me so happy. Look, darlings, we have never done this before, so I just want to say thank you so much to Ken Spencer and to the Divinity School and to the Duke Endowment for all the incredible work you put into this. To my Everything Happens team, it was absolutely impossible. Also, how much foliage is too much foliage? Never, never, never. Thank you so much for making things so beautiful and knowing that my heart's dream is this human being right here. For you beautiful martyrs who insist on loving and serving the Lord in pastor school, tomorrow morning you have to come back at 9:30 a.m. for worship, and it's my job to tell you that. There are books available in the courtyard if you want to experience the written majesty of this one right here. And may I, if you don't mind, may I just bless us with words inspired by this human being as we go. In your best thought and in your most deeply mediocre one, bless you. In your fear and in your courage and in your curiosity that may only be 1% bigger than your fear, bless you. In your reaching for more, in your paying glorious attention to the wonderful ordinariness, and I hope lack of productivity and shocking miracle that is your gorgeous life. Bless you, my loves. Go in peace. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thanks, my loves.